They used to say that we shouldn't receive reparations because the Irish were indentured servants and they were just as bad as slaves, and they didn't receive reparations either, and it's not fair to them. Now they're taking that egregious bad faith statement up a notch by saying that indentured servitude was worse than slavery. And that is their new reason and what they're saying to counter reparations.
The price of freedom is death. We're coming to get our check.
Brothers and sisters, be one to every single last one of y'all. I appreciate y'all for being here with us this evening. We're a little bit behind schedule. That's fine. Believe me, it's been one of them days. It's been a long day, family. It's been a long day. But we're going to be here regardless of everything. We are going to show up. The show must go on. All right. So, since I appreciate your time and I appreciate your support, I tremendously do. I'm going to get started very quickly with this. Um, Before I do, of course, you guys know what we do. You all know what we do. If you've been here, you know what we do. We play the copyright disclaimer to establish to the platform that everything we play thus forth will be protected under the guise of fair use. So, as we're doing that, what I would appreciate from every single last one of you all is to hit that like button. Make sure you're subscribed and have your notification bell turned on. With that being said, I'll be right back. Copyright disclaimer. Under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. So, before we get started, I would appreciate, like the fact that you guys are here. We got more people piling up. That's good. We're a little bit behind schedule, so it might take a little minute, but it's okay. That's fine. I want to say something. Before we get started, this has been an argument. The whole Native American, not Native American, the Irish American, the Irish immigrant, the indentured servant argument has been used as a way to counter reparations for a long time, for some years now. Now they're starting to take it up a notch. I'm gonna let you know how severe this issue is by playing some of these clips. And they like to do that only with us. When it only comes to foundational Black Americans and our payment of reparations, that's the only time they bring up Irish people. That's the only time. Any other time that they don't bring up the Irish indentured servants. Now, mind you, they very conveniently skip over the Chinese. Okay. The Chinese Exclusion Act, the Japanese being internment camps, and all of that stuff. I'm going to play you this clip. This comes from Charlie Kirk and Candace Owens. This is from Turning Point USA. This was a few years ago. It's only a few minutes.
So there are some points with y'all that I do agree with. The whole toxic masculinity, Me Too movement. I agree with you. But you said that give black people reparations.
Should or shouldn't?
Shouldn't.
No.
Okay.
Well, I actually didn't. I retweeted someone else. I think you're talking about DC Drano.
No, you said your stance on Twitter. You said on Twitter that your
You're talking to me, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
You said your
Sure.
solution for is that America should just move forward.
Yeah.
But the UN actually said that
We're not the United Nations.
I'm just saying that they said that the U.S. owes us reparations, but and you said that.
When did I say the U.S. owes us reparations?
No, I'm saying that they said that. You
The
never
UN.
said that.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Sorry, I wasn't following. So the United Nations said in 2018,
No,
2016 that America owes us reparations. Okay.
And my question is, and you said that racism doesn't exist anymore. When did you?
I
She
never
did not
said
say
that.
that.
You
Oh,
read
she
you
didn't?
read an article.
No.
Nope. I said I was never a slave, and then the root
Okay.
jumped into the front of what I said and said Candace says racism doesn't exist because she was never a slave. That was fake news. Racism does exist.
Well, I hate
America
the
is not a
root- I
racist
hate
country.
the root too. So.
Yeah.
So Like, why don't you think we deserve reparations? I mean, you did get a check for a racist act back when you were in high school.
So first off, these are two different points. I do not think that we deserve reparations for slavery. I was never a slave in this country, and I think that the idea, if you think that you're going to get more than $200 from the government, okay, this entire debate is just it's a joke, okay.
Now, just keep this in mind. I want you guys to keep this in mind. Candace's family is not from here, so yeah, she wouldn't receive reparations in this country anyway. The volume is a little bit low, so that's why I'm kind of letting it play. But the volume is a little bit low. All right.
It's never going to happen. Do you think that we're the only group, I'm just going to ask this question, that has had something awful happen to them in this country? Should the Japanese get reparations for the internment camps?
Yes,
to
they
the
do.
Irish,
Okay,
all the
there's
Irish?
18
Who's Irish in this room? Raise your hand. Should they get, that's a lot of Irish people. Should they get reparations for the Irish did not apply during the progressive era and all the terrible things that happened to them? What about the Jewish people? Should they get reparations for the Holocaust?
Well, they did.
Okay. She brings up the Japanese people. She brings them up with knowing good and damn well that they already received reparations. Japanese people already received reparations. So with her making that argument, she's already defeated her point by saying that the Japanese should the Japanese receive reparations? And then knows when he said, yeah, they did. She then talks over him to say, oh, damn, I didn't mean to say the Japanese. I meant to say everybody else, that we can somewhat make the argument that they didn't receive reparations. Now she makes the argument for, Irish people during the progressive era. Well, the Irish people, and we're going to get into that, but this is one of the arguments that they've been making, the Irish people during the progressive era. What about the Jews? And then listen to what he says here. Okay.
They get reparations in Germany.
No, they didn't. That is a myth, and that
Not
is
in
false.
America.
They did not get any. They didn't get any reparations in America. So should
I
so-
wasn't talking- I
okay,
wasn't
but here's my
talking about
question:
the
Do you
But that didn't happen in America. World War II didn't happen in America. They weren't putting internment camps and all that stuff in America. We were not persecuting them in America. They did receive reparations from the government that harmed them. They did receive reparations from Germany. They didn't receive reparations in America because that didn't happen in America. And to be very honest, them immigrating to America and them coming to America, they were giving certain platforms and they were getting certain subsidies, and they were made accommodations were made on their behalf because of what happened in Germany. All right. So there were specific set-asides, not necessarily reparations, but in a form, yes, of reparations, despite the fact that it wasn't America that did that to them. And she's defeating her own point because she said, well, not in America. Okay, well, do you agree with the principle of reparations or not?
understand how slippery the slope is when you start saying reparations? At the beginning of humanity, the slave trade used to be legal. It used to be legal. And do you want to know who got reparations? This is actually fascinating. I learned this from Larry Elder yesterday. In the UK, they decided to
Larry Elder
give reparations because of the slave trade. When they abolished it, you know who they gave reparations to? The slave owners. Because black people were their property legally. It was legal, right? So when they got rid of it, they gave them reparations. The point is that no matter where you go in history, someone was oppressed. You cannot look to correct history by thinking that you're going to get a small check, because every single person in this room would get a check. It's just a means for them to seize you emotionally and make you think that you deserve something or you're going to get something. And if they actually factually did it, it would probably amount to $400 that you couldn't even spend it at a club on a weekend.
Okay, we're gonna stop that. And I just want to emphasize, y'all want the glasses. I'm seeing a lot of people say something about y'all love the glasses. Lord, I don't even wear glasses on a regular basis, but here we go with the glasses. Let me say something. She wouldn't receive reparations anyway. And this is back when she was cool with Charlie Kirk and all of that stuff. Now she's trying to do a little pivot where she, on her platform now, she's a little less anti-black. And I put this clip up here to remind you all of her notorious anti-black history, because for whatever reason, a lot of people like to give Candace Owens a lot of leeway that they don't give any anti-black conservative. It's very particular that Candace Owens, out of you can't name a single other anti-black conservative, especially not one with a platform as big as hers and as known as hers, and who's been spewing the most anti-black racist rhetoric for years now. You can't name one person besides her that people argue, well, she is right sometimes, though. She right about that. I gotta give her credit. Damn. I wish we would stop doing that. And I'm doing this because sometimes we need a little refresher. We need a little reminder, okay? She's not on our side. She's never been, and she doesn't get to pivot back over here because she got kicked out of Ben Shapiro's thing, all right? She got kicked, whatever that thing is. She got kicked out of that. We're not going to allow her to pivot back over here. So let us be a reminder. She's been using the tether method of, well, I'm black, even though she's not FBA. According to her, I'm black, but I say we shouldn't receive reparations. All right. She defeated her point and wouldn't let the other guy speak. And then they closed the video and they moved on to the next person. This is what we've been hearing. Daily Wire, that's what it is, the Daily Wire, right? This is what we've been hearing. But when I tell y'all, the situation has gotten much worse because reparations is starting to get more advanced. It's starting to get more serious. It's starting to really take it up a notch to get more serious, more advanced, right? And you got people now like Matt Walsh. Matt Walsh is sitting up there talking about how Irish immigrants had it harder and worse than us. I mean, he goes on a whole rant against reparations. Let's take a listen to this.
There's a concerted effort underway among House Democrats to revive the legacy of Cori Bush, such as it is, but they're not revising the whole bid for sainthood routine. Instead, they are doubling down on Cori Bush's true passion in life, which is whipping up a race war. And to that end, Democrats are revitalizing one of Bush's dumbest ideas, which is her plan to enact trillions of dollars in reparations. Quoting from The Hill, a coalition of Democratic lawmakers and advocates on Thursday reintroduced a resolution to offer reparations to descendants of enslaved Africans and people of African descent. Representative Summer Lee led the reintroduction of the Reparations Now resolution, which was first introduced in 2023 by former Representative Cori Bush. The resolution calls for the federal government to allocate trillions of dollars in reparations to Black Americans. Now, keep in mind the entire federal budget for the last fiscal year was around $7 trillion. So we're talking about spending a very significant chunk of the overall federal budget on handouts to Black people, essentially. And on top of these trillions of dollars in reparations, Cory Booker and Jasmine Crockett are also planning to introduce the Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation Commission Act, which would supposedly, quote, acknowledge and memorialize the arrival of the first slave ship in the United States and the injustices suffered by people of color throughout history. Now, here is Ayanna Pressley and Summer Lee to explain. And before I play this, these clips are not sped up in any way, at least as far as I know. I mean, this is how I found them. They're like this. It just seems like they're talking really, really fast for some reason. But anyway, here it is.
We are in a moment of anti-blackness on steroids, and we refuse to be silent. We will not back down in our pursuit of racial justice. The antidote to anti-blackness is to be pro-black, and we will do it unapologetically. The United States government owes us a debt, and we need reparations now.
Okay. And I want you guys to keep this in mind. We had already did, I'm letting it play a little bit, but we had already did a live stream on that. We've already done a live stream on this subject. Okay. That's already been done. We already did that.
Let's make it clear. There is a debt that does exist. This country has taken so much from Black folks and has a debt it owes because for over 400 years into this very day, this country has stolen Black labor, Black lives, Black futures. Industries were built and maintained through the subjugation of Black people in this country, and wealth was built and maintained through the discriminatory policies that still plague us to this day. And to be clear, some people directly benefited from it or are direct beneficiaries of it. We have systems that create and perpetuate imbalances and balances in our society, and you either benefit from it or you are disenfranchised by it. And Black people continue to be disenfranchised and harmed by these systems. Others receive advantages from it.
I mean, that has to be
Okay. It is. And he's an idiot for not noticing that. When videos are sped up, you can even tell the pitch of the video by it being sped up. And he should know that. But I mean, of course, it's Matt. So of course he's not going to know that because he's not that smart, not that bright. We discussed this. Now, before he goes into it, I want to remind everybody something I was saying yesterday about the system of white supremacy taking both sides of the argument. So you got Ayanna Pressley, you got this other lady, they're out here talking about reparations now, and they're using this not because they're genuinely about reparations. They're not genuine advocates for reparations. They're using reparations because as a leverage point, a political leverage point, because they understand the black society in general, Black America in general, really are not feeling the Democratic Party. They're starting to lose more Black people as time goes forward. They're starting to lose everybody, but mainly their base. So they need something that can reattach them to the Black base that they desperately need, especially going into the midterms and the next presidential election, because they have no other option. So they're going to reintroduce or bring up Project 2025. They're going to reintroduce HR 40. They're going to reintroduce HR 40. Now, we discussed this before. We discussed before that the whole time during Biden's presidency, they didn't try to push HR 40, which we've established many times before, that HR 40 is only a study for reparations. HR 40 is not no real reparations, but HR 40 is a study for reparations, okay? We've discussed this several times, all right? What happens is that when the Democrats are in power, they're very hush-hush about HR 40, don't like to bring it up. They don't like to bring up reparations. Now, when the Republicans are in power and they have an excuse, which is the Republican opposition, now they're going to bring up HR 40 because now it's going to seem as if they're on our side and they're the underdogs, and they get to kind of use the Republicans are in power as an excuse for not being able to get it done, an excuse that they didn't have when Biden was in office, especially during his first 2 years when he had the House and the Senate. They didn't have that excuse, so they were quiet. But now they have an excuse. Oh, the House turned red, the Senate turned red, the presidency is red. Oh my God, there's so much pushback. There's nothing we can do. Now let's bring it up. This is the perfect timing. This is white supremacy taking both sides of the argument. And then you're going to have Matt Walsh be all like, oh my God, look at the handouts. This is a handout. Look at this is a handout. Dude, weren't you just advocating for the white racist woman who was yelling the N-word at a 5-year-old autistic child? And she got close to $1 million for that. Weren't you the one saying that was a good thing? Now you want to call reparations for slavery a handout. And I'm saying this to let you guys know, they're going to call anything that we do, whether we earn it, whether it was inherited to us, no matter what, anything that we get at all is a handout. If we work and we go to school and we get a degree, that's affirmative action. That's a handout. That's a handout. We didn't deserve that. Don't matter how many hours you worked. Don't matter how much student loan debt you have to take out. Don't matter how much effort you put into it. You got something, it's a handout. When it comes to a job, if you got a good job, oh, that's DEI. That's just a DEI policy. That's a handout. So if you go to school, it's a handout. If you get a job, it's a handout. If you get reparations, it's a handout. So at this point, they will call every single thing that we do or get or anything a handout. They will do it. Everything. All right. So at this point, we shouldn't even really care what they're saying about it. But we're here to debunk their arguments. All right. So let's continue.
That up, right? That's like, are they really just talking that way? I don't know. It's either sped up or they're on cocaine. I mean, either one of those possibilities is very valid. And now, before we go any further with the specifics of this legislation, I have to provide something of a disclosure at this point. You know, we've talked about the issue of reparations plenty of times on the show, and the difference is that now I have a very personal stake in the issue, and that's because recently and somewhat unexpectedly, and I say this with nothing but modesty in my heart, I have become, as you know, something of a pioneer when it comes to the issue of reparations in the United States. In fact, according to all available information, I am the only person in America, along with Robin DiAngelo, who has actually paid reparations. Now, you might point out that I was undercover doing a movie when I paid my reparations. Am I Racist? Which you can watch on Daily Wire right now. You might point out that I took my reparations back immediately after the cameras were turned off. You might point out that the reparations were only like $20 or whatever I had in my wallet. All of that is true, but that's not the important thing to keep in mind here. The important thing is that I am an expert on this issue. I've been
He thinks he's being funny by mocking the issue of reparations. That's what he thinks he's doing, is being funny, because there was like some type of little skit or a video or something like that he did on the Daily Wire where like he said they were quote unquote like mocking white guilt, and he took out like $15 or maybe $20 or something like that and gave it to a black person and then took the money right back. So he thinks he's being funny, but he's being very disrespectful and condescending. And this is really the humor of the white, this very dry, sarcastic, unfunny humor, this flavorless humor, this mocking humor, all right, it is very indicative of their culture.
Personally involved in a way that very few people are. And so I have no choice but to chime in and provide my analysis. And with that in mind, the first thing that needs to be said is that if we really want reparations for the descendants of slaves, then, we're going to need to spend a lot more than $1 trillion. And that's because, of course, every single person who's alive right now on the planet, if you go back far enough, has ancestors who were slaves, period. No exceptions.
Okay. Remember, that's the same thing Candace Owens said. That's the same thing Candace Owens said. Well, everybody is a slave. No, we're not going to do that then. We're not going to do that. Because if that was the case, if that was the argument, legitimately, why did you guys give the Japanese their money from an internment camp? Why did you guys give the Mongoloid Native Americans reparations? Or the last, or why would you guys why was anybody ever given reparations for anything? If we're going to go with that argument, we're going to break this down with different arguments. But if we're going to go with, well, slavery existed everywhere in the world and everybody in the world can trace their lineage back to slavery, even if you want to make that argument that everybody in the world was a slave at some point in some time, okay, why did America ever give reparations at any point? Why did America not say to the Japanese, like, well, hold on, we put you in internment camps, but there were people who were locked up, falsely incarcerated years before you, so we would have to give the money to them, so we can't give it to you because everybody has family members that were falsely incarcerated, so what makes you special? Notice that argument didn't come up. There are people to this very day, 2025, who receive checks when their family members lose their life in war. They receive checks. There were people who received checks, the Union soldiers, their descendants, they received checks if they died in war, if they died in battle. That happens all of the time. It happens to this very day. If a father goes out and he's married or something, and he goes out and he dies in battle, the American government is going to pay the mother and the wife, or the wife of the deceased, the widow, and the child. Why would they ever do that? They would make the argument, oh, well, hold on now, before we have to pay you, everybody throughout history, there's always been battles and people have always died in battle. Why should we have to pay you? We would have to pay everybody in history, right? Notice how these arguments about everybody else in the world never comes up when it comes to any other circumstance, when it comes to anything else. It only comes up when it comes to us. And then let's go even into more detail about the fact that he's talking about, well, everybody was indentured servants or whatever. I mean, everybody was slaves or whatever the case is. Okay, well, everybody didn't build America. That and you can't make that argument. This is why the term FBA they hate so much. They call it a hate group. They call it a cult. They call it this. They call it that because they hate it so much because the term is so potent and defined and so strong and easy to understand. Nobody can kind of remix it. Nobody can kind of crowbar their way into it. Nobody can do that. Nobody can infiltrate this the term when or the lineage when you use it in this way. Nobody can do that whatsoever. All right. Everybody was slaves. Did everybody's slavery build America? The answer is no. The answer is no. Everybody's slavery did not build the United States. Only our slavery built the United States. Only our slavery built the United States. We built the United States. So yeah, everybody else, if you care that much about it, you can go to British about it. You can go to the British about it. You can go to the French about it. You can go wherever you want to go to about that. We're going to America about this. Okay. The whole argument of, well, everybody was a slave. Okay. What the argument I used before, y'all wouldn't apply that. It happened to everybody. So we shouldn't have to pay you excuse with any other circumstance or with any other group of people. So you're not going to get away with using that with us.
The Romans alone enslaved millions of people from all over the world. So did Egypt, Greece, China, the Persians, the Russians, the Mayans, the Aztecs, Ottomans, and so on. And that's not even getting into indentured servitude. You know, you take a look at what happened to Irish Catholics in the 17th century in places like Barbados, for example. Technically, many of these Irishmen became indentured servants, not slaves. But in many cases, that meant that they were treated even worse than slaves since they weren't expected to work for their entire lives.
No, it doesn't at all. And first off, we don't live in Barbados. We are in North America. He's talking about something that happened in Barbados. That ain't got nothing to do with our reparations. That doesn't have anything to do with foundational Black Americans. And they were not treated worse. But we're going to do a little bit of fact checking. We're going to let him go on a little bit longer. And then we're going to do a little bit of fact checking.
Roughly half of them died within 4 years by some estimates. As the researcher Michael Mahoney pointed out, quote,
by some estimates, that means it's not true. It's not factually based. Anytime they say, well, they make a statement and then they'll say by some estimates, that means it's not factually based.
John Scott, an English adventurer who traveled in the West Indies during the Commonwealth, saw Irish servants working in field gangs with slaves without stockings under the scorching sun. The Irish, he wrote, were derided by the Negroes and branded with the epithet of white slaves. Once in the Caribbean, many plantation owners considered servants and freemen from Ireland as a potentially subversive lot who had to be controlled and kept in a laboring status. Punishments for attempted escapes included branding the letters FT, fugitive trader, on the servant's forehead. One assembly member in Barbados is quoted in 1667 as stating, "We have more than a good many Irish amongst us, therefore I am for the downright Scot, who I am certain will fight without a crucifix about his neck." Close quote.
And none of this stuff counts because we're not in Barbados.
Quote. In other words, a lot of obvious anti-Catholic, anti-white bigotry at work here. And in many cases, these Irish servants were treated far worse than slaves as they worked alongside them. And this is just one of...
He says anti-Catholic, anti-white. Who is enslaving them? It wasn't Black folk. Black folk didn't enslave the Irish. It was other white people who enslaved the Irish. They might not have been Irish, but they were still white. So what makes it anti-white? Because during that time, Irish weren't even really considered white, to be honest. It was British people who were who had contracts of indentured in servitude to other white people. Okay. Now, I'm gonna pause that for a second. Gonna do a little fact checking real quick. Gonna get these glasses together. Okay, let's do a little fact checking, y'all. Gonna do a little fact checking, okay? Because we want to be correct. We want to be correct. So this right here is some of the contracts of indentured servants, okay? Because we do have to understand that indentured servants, they had contracts, and most of them would work for a certain amount of years, and then the contract would be up. That's the case. Most of them will work for a certain amount of years, the contract would be up, and that would be that. All right. you look a little bit further into the contract, you'll actually start to see. Now, of course, it's faded out. The handwriting is difficult to read, but zooming in, and now this is the same contract, y'all. These are the same contracts. Okay. But zooming in, you'll see under this indentured, it says of his, I'm going to read it, of his own free will and accord. Okay. Now that's interesting. They say of his own free will and accord. Well, was he an indentured servant under his own free will and accord? What does that mean? Okay. So that makes us start to look up certain things a little bit more. So let's look up some more. We're going to do some more fact checking, okay? Because if they were treated worse than slaves, then we should definitely know the history, the true history about that. Don't you think? So let's look this up. So I got a couple of sources here, a couple of things here. We're going to look this up and discuss them. So now, normally I don't like to go to Wikipedia, but I feel like this was an easier read because they break it down in a much more simplistic format, a simplistic way. So we're going to start right here. Not going to read too much because there's still more we got to cover, y'all. So I need you guys to hit that like button. I would greatly appreciate you all hitting that like button. Greatly appreciate you all hitting that like button. It says, between 1/2 and 2/3 of European immigrants to the American colonies between the 1630s and the American Revolution under indentureds. It says, however, while almost half European immigrants to the 13 colonies, while almost half of them to the 13 colonies were indentured servants, at any time they were outnumbered. It says, at any one time they were outnumbered by workers who had never been indentured. It says, or those indentured had expired. Expired. That's interesting. That's an interesting word. Continues to say that means that it would like go out of date then. That means it was an end date to their indentured servitude. And then it says, and thus free wage labor was more prevalent for Europeans in the colonies. Indentured servants, look at the part that's highlighted, everybody. Indentured people were numerically important mostly in the region of Virginia, north to New Jersey. Other colonies saw far fewer of them. So those were the colonies mostly where the indentured servants were at, the Irish indentured servants in the 1600s. It says the total number of European immigrants to all 13 colonies before 1775, that was technically before America, was about 500,000. Of these, listen to this part, of these 55,000 of the 500,000, 55,000 were involuntary prisoners. Okay, so what does this mean? Let's discuss what this means. We don't want to be incorrect about anything. What does that mean? Well, that means most of these people, if we go back over here and we start to do a little bit of detective work and we start to look at the actual contracts of the indentured servants here, it says of his own free will. Why would the contract say of his own free will if he was kidnapped, if he was enslaved, if he didn't have a choice? Why would he say such a thing? Of his own free will doesn't really make that much sense, except for the fact that when you do a little bit more research and you're doing a little bit more digging, I want you guys to let's really lock in with this. Most of them came here because, listen to this, y'all, they wanted to. Dun dun dun. They wanted to. Most of them came here because they wanted to. Most of them volunteered. Most of them because they wanted to leave Ireland. Most of them said, okay, I will sign a contract and I will work for you for a few years. And with that, I will be able to come to the New World, which is what they were calling America prior to it being called America. I will be able to come to the New World after I work off this contract. I will be a free person who's not an indentured servant. I will be able to buy land, have rights, and all of that stuff. I'm not a slave or a property. I have a working contract with you. And most of them, as you can see right here in the contracts we have here, it's difficult to read. So I'm zooming into the one that's not difficult to read. Most of them wanted to come here. And they knew what they were getting themselves into. They knew the work that they were going to be doing, and they knew everything that was going to come about it. Most of them did. This was during the indentured servant time. Most of them did. Do people, first off, they did get land, which is why, especially in places like Barbados and Caribbean, you do have black people who have Irish surnames. And you have FBA too, who have Irish surnames because of that. Because they were not only able to buy land after their contract were up, they were also able to purchase slaves after their contract was up. This is why there are a lot of people who are not Irish who have Irish surnames, because our names were changed to surnames. So that defeats that whole purpose. Well, where's their reparations of indentured servitude? You mean the people who also own slaves? You think that our slavery reparations should be shared amongst the people who also participated in our slavery? Is that the argument you're making? Is that the argument you're making? And he might make, okay, well, that was during that time. What about the potato famine? Okay, and they came here around, the 1800s, the mid 1800s and everything like that. So let's look at that. They came here around the mid 1800s. Now, they didn't come here to be indentured servants, no, necessarily. So we're going to look this stuff up, going to do a little bit more research, because we don't want to be incorrect. We don't. We want to be correct about everything that we say here, everything that we're saying. Okay, hold on. Let me see something. Irish indentured servants. So, yeah, they came here around that time. A lot of them were hungry. A lot of them were starving. And a lot of them, they're saying, they would team up with black people. They would team up with black people, and it would just be as bad. What was interesting about this, it reminds me of the movie Sinners, and how a lot of people were making an argument that Irish people were oppressed because there was oppression of Irish people by the British people. It was oppression, because the British people, even though they didn't treat the Irish people as bad, they treated the Irish people very badly. Okay, they were colonized, and then when they came to America, the Irish people, and this was during the potato famine time, not the other time. When they came to America, this is what they were on. Okay, this is what they were on. So let's do a little bit of research while we're talking about the Irish. Okay. So this is, and you know who actually, let me give a shout out. Let me give a shout out to Torian Rain. Okay. On YouTube, he's Torian Rain Reloaded. He did a whole series on the Black massacres. This is the first entry of his series. So if you guys definitely want to find out more about that, you guys need to go look at that. Okay. So right here, this is the New York City draft riots. This was around the time the Civil War was popping off. So we're going to read into this a little bit. It says the New York City draft riots, July 13th to 16th, 1865, sometimes referred to as the Manhattan draft riots and known at the time as the draft week, were violent disturbance in lower Manhattan, widely, Lord, let me, like this. Widely regarded as accumulation of working class as the working class discontent with new laws passed by Congress that year to draft men to fight an ongoing civil war. Okay, so this is why the draft riots started, because they didn't want to fight in the Civil War. Now, going down a little bit, because we still have a lot to cover, and I respect y'all time. And I appreciate y'all being here. And I would appreciate if y'all hit that like. It says, President Abraham Lincoln diverted several. Oh. President Abraham Lincoln diverted several regiments of militia and voluntary troops after the Battle of Gettysburg to control the city. The protest turned into a race riot against African Americans by Irish rioters. The official death toll was listed at either 119 or 120 individuals, okay, most of whom were black. Conditions in the city were such at Major General, as it says, conditions in the city were such that Major General John E. Will, commander of the Department of East, said on July 16th that martial law ought to be proclaimed, but I have not a sufficient force to enforce it. So this is the Irish people. Okay. This is them attacking black people. Well, we want to talk about how Irish people was so mistreated. And this is something I also said in the, when I did the review of the movie Sinners. I appreciate y'all patience. Trust me, long day. Had a long day. All right. Had a long day. Remember when I'm going to slow down. Remember when I reviewed the movie Sinners and I said that the character Remick, who's the vampire, the main character, the main villain in the movie, and he was talking about how his people were oppressed and his people faced oppression that was similar in certain degrees to the oppression black people faced here. And then I said how it's interesting that this vampire is Irish, and the first thing that Irish did, and this is in real life, the first thing that Irish did when they got a little bit of power, whether that was indentured servitude or whether that was during the potato famine, whether that was during the draft riots, whether that was doing whatever the case may be, the second they got an opportunity, they started to oppress black people. In every situation, when Irish people, when they got from with under the rule of the British, the first thing they said is, I want to go oppress black people the way I was oppressed. That's the first thing that they did. You saw that with indentured servitude. The first thing they did when they got out of their short contract, that was oftentimes 3 years. When they got out of their brief contract, they said, okay, well, let me go buy some slaves. I'm gonna go buy some slaves. That's what they did. When they came here during the potato famine, they said, okay, well, you know what? If we got to do something, and instead of teaming up with black people, because they weren't considered white necessarily at that time, and instead of teaming up with them, we're going to acquiesce to white supremacy, and we're going to show them how well we can assimilate into American culture by attacking black people. They do this all the time. Every single time in history where they've had the opportunity to do this, they've done this. Now, I'm not going to just bring up one single incident. I'm going to bring up another incident. Okay? Another incident. This is very similar, but look at this. It says in 1862, Brooklyn riot. Now, the one I played for you before was in Manhattan. Now I'm talking about a whole nother riot. So it wasn't just one riot. Okay? And the date is different. So I don't want you guys to think this is another name for the same riot. It says a riot occurred in the Campbell Hill neighborhood of Brooklyn, New York, United States on August 4th, 1862. All right. Now, in the previous one I showed you, that happened in 1863. So this one actually predates that. It was less severe. This riot was less severe than the New York riot, but this riot predates the riot I was talking about before. It says it involved a group of white Americans, largely consisting of Irish Americans, targeting a group of about 20 African American workers at a tobacco factory in Sigwick Street. On Sigwick Street, okay? So every single time we see, y'all, we see Irish people who were never slaves, who had rights that we didn't have, and then use those rights to sue their masters if their masters went above and beyond when it came to their treatment, a lot of whom, the indentured servants, a lot of whom were in Barbados. They ain't got nothing to do with us. And then the second, even though they volunteered, keyword volunteer, keyword they wanted to come here, even though they did that and got their wealth and everything, they started oppressing black people. Okay. And you mean to tell me that this is their big excuse as to why we can't receive reparations? Okay. Let's go back. Because Matt Walsh says some more stuff that I definitely want to address. He says some more stuff I want to address.
Of many, many examples. Here's another. Did you know that in 1797, 20% of the U.S. federal budget, a total of $1 million at the time, went to paying tribute to Muslim nations in North Africa so that they would stop enslaving white people? This was a big business for them. In total, they enslaved more than 1 million whites from both Europe and the United States. This was during the Barbary Wars. And for context today, we don't spend anywhere near 20% of the U.S. budget on defense spending. But in 1797, we spent 20% of the budget on ransom payments to Algiers.
So, and he's taking that situation way out of context. That's not how that happened. Okay. After the Revolutionary War, the British Navy would stop protecting America. So when they were a country of pirates, okay, this wasn't necessarily a country like that, like a whole government. Mostly there were pirates who had kidnapped some Americans. And there was a deal made. It was a treaty made. All right. And they weren't all white either. So this whole narrative that white people have been getting oppressed, which is something that you're starting to hear a lot lately, this whole narrative that white people have been getting oppressed and nothing has been done about it, this is something that's simply historically false. It's not true whatsoever.
And as we did so, the Africans made sure to mock Americans at every opportunity. The tribute was ultimately ferried to Constantinople by the frigate USS George Washington, and along the way, the Africans forced the American warship to fly an Ottoman flag. There was sadistic brutality going on at every level, and they only stopped enslaving white people because they were forced to do so. Now, these are chapters from American history that you don't hear much about. Certainly smooth-brained race hustlers like Ayanna Pressley won't mention any of this, probably don't even know about any of it. And that's because, as always, their goal isn't to actually have a serious discussion about reparations to the extent that it's even possible to do so. They know that this resolution has no chance of passing in either chamber of Congress, much less being signed into law. They know that this is purely performative. It's a purely performative piece of legislation that's intended to stoke racial conflict and enrage as many people as possible so that they'll feel entitled and envious. And then they might finally start rioting, as Democrats desperately want them to do. And
to stoke racial conflict. Now, mind you, every time we say something about oppression, it's quote unquote stoking racial conflict. Just keep this in mind. And I want you to use this argument anytime you're dealing with suspected white supremacists or tethers or whatever the case may be, Sambo, the Massa lovers, whatever the case may be. Anytime we talk about getting what's owed to us, it's quote unquote stoking racial conflict, or it's leading to a race war. That's what they say. That's what they like to say. Now, when they talk about, when Matt Walsh, when he talks about black fatigue, that's not quote unquote stoking racial conflict. They've made several videos talking about their black fatigue, how tired they are of black people, how sick of black people everybody in America is. That's not ever stoking racial conflict. Okay. To talk about black people negatively day in and day out, to cherry pick news articles and videos of black people fighting and street fighting, to paint the whole community with this negative brush, that's not stoking racial conflict. That's just reporting on what's going on in the world. And that's just reporting on what's going on in Chicago and Atlanta and all of these other places. No, that's not stoking racial conflict. When we say, you know what, racism exists and that should be fixed. Oh, you're starting a race war. That's what it is. You want to start. Why can't we have peace? I want you to keep this in mind. To them, Peace means black people shutting up about oppression. Peace does not mean stopping the oppression and making good on the wrongs that's been done to us. It doesn't mean making amends, America making amends. Peace just means black people being quiet. And that's to them peace. That's to them peace. They don't honestly feel they have to stop anything. Okay. I don't honestly feel, I was at the dentist earlier today. So that's why started late. You know, it was a numbing thing. Boy, I can feel it kind of resurfacing now. But anyway, the show must go on. Like I said before, the show must go on. The black fatigue argument, that's not in stoking racial conflict or racial division. When you say white people are sick of black people, and it's okay for a white racist woman to call a black 5-year-old child the N-word, and you justify her getting damn near $1 million, that's not stoking racial conflict. Nothing that they do is stoking racial conflict. When we say, you know what, America enslaved our people, oh, here you go trying to divide us again. So unity means us being silent and us acquiescing to their oppression of us. No. If that's what unity means, I don't want it.
It's no coincidence that, as we talked about yesterday, we are seeing this pivot on the left back to race hustling. Not that they ever left it, but pivoting back to it in a very serious way, heading into the summer under the first year of Trump's new term in office. Pretty clear what they want to see happen. Now, of course, it should also be said that indirect, inexplicit reparations have already been paid in the form of.
Again. We've already paid reparations. What do you guys think he's going to say? What do you guys, and they say this all the time, and you guys have seen this for years now, so I'm sure you already know what he's going to say. But I want to see in the chat room, what do you guys think that he's going to say? Indirect reparations have already been paid. What do you think that means? Affirmative action, welfare, DEI. Those are the indirect reparations that they say that we've already received. Let's see if you guys are correct with that. Affirmative action, welfare, and DEI.
DEI policies in the form of. In a very serious way, heading into the summer under the first year of Trump's new term in office. Pretty clear what they want to see happen. Now, of course, it should also be said that indirect, inexplicit reparations have already been paid in the form of DEI policies, in the form of affirmative action, the welfare state, every other policy put in place in the name of white.
See, y'all said it. Y'all said it. He said affirmative action, DEI, and welfare. All of these things that they benefit more than us, but this is our reparations that they, even though they benefit more than us.
Guilt. Most of the federal government is a kind of make-work program for certain demographics to funnel them taxpayer money without any accountability. And we see what good all that has done for the black community. But explicit reparations, the kind where black Americans get money because they're black Americans for slavery, that will certainly never happen. From a political perspective, it's not feasible. It's just not going to happen. It will not be tolerated by the American public. This is yet another failed idea from the Cori Bush playbook, one among many. At the same time, it's interesting to note that this legislation comes at the very moment that white South Africans are fleeing their homeland, seeking.
Now, before we get into that, let's look at some of the things of affirmative action. Okay, because we don't want to be incorrect about anything. We want to be factual about everything we're saying. So we're going to look at some of the stuff. I just pulled this up. This wasn't the original article I wanted to play, but I think this will suffice. So we're going to look at some of this stuff just a little bit. What is affirmative? It says, what is affirmative action? In the U.S., young whites are far more likely to get bachelor degrees than blacks and Hispanics. Okay. So that's why. Now, when you say who benefits the most from affirmative action, even though they are far more likely to get that stuff, okay, we go, Lord, see, there's a lot of ads that be popping up and stuff like that. Go over here. This was the one I was talking about. White women benefit the most from affirmative action. So why did they oppose it? They benefit the most from affirmative action. Okay. It says people often associate affirmative action with efforts to end discrimination of people of color. Oh, Lord, I hate that term. It says, but scholars say the greatest beneficiaries of affirmative action policies are white women. From college campuses to American workplace, white women today are more educated and make up a bigger slice of the workforce as a result of decades of affirmative action policies, scholars say. White women have also made inroads in corporate leadership that people of color and women of color have not. Y'all got it. Yeah, y'all already know they come in with that. Okay. Now they're talking about, they go on to say the Supreme Court on Thursday struck down affirmative action admissions policy used by Harvard College and the University of North Carolina to build diversity on their campuses. All right. So yeah, we don't have to go into that. We already know affirmative action. They already took that down with affirmative action, right? We know that, so we don't need to go into that. But this, white women. So if it's white women, and I want you guys to understand this, all of them know that white women are the main beneficiaries of affirmative action. None of them are stupid. I mean, none of them are that stupid. None of them are stupid on that fact. Okay? Because they are kind of stupid. But none of them are stupid on that fact. None of them are stupid on or unaware of that. All of them are aware of that. I want you to understand that. They're all aware that white women get DEI benefits. They all are aware that white people receive government assistance. They're aware of all of this stuff. They're just using this as an anti-black, tired anti-black talking point. These people are not even original when it comes to updating things, which is why terms like woke, terms like DEI, terms like affirmative action, they use it and then they blow it up and they use it for every single little thing until it doesn't matter anymore. Just like the term they tried to use recently, they've been trying their best to use the term black fatigue recently, but that's not even working out for them because these people are unoriginal. I want to get to, because he says something else that I think is very interesting. I want to get to that. And then there's something else I want to discuss with you all.
Refuge in the United States. They're being forcibly evicted from their own homes solely because of their skin color, as we've discussed several times this week. From a political perspective, it's not feasible. It's just not going to happen. It will not be tolerated by the American public. This is yet another failed idea from the Cori Bush playbook, one among many. At the same time, it's interesting to note that this legislation comes at the very moment that white South Africans are fleeing their homeland, seeking refuge in the United States. They're being forcibly evicted from their own homes solely because of their skin color, as we've discussed several times this week. And you know what that means. There's about to be a lot more room in Africa for any supposedly oppressed group in the United States, including congresswomen like Ayanna Pressley.
White people are being forcibly removed from their homes. That's not true. That's not true. All of this white genocide talking point and garbage and stuff like that they keep saying is going on in South Africa. It's not true. Nobody's persecuting them on being white.
So maybe there's an opportunity here for a kind of reparation through repatriation thing. Maybe we can offer some of these Democrats taxpayer-funded, all expenses paid trip to whatever lands their ancestors are from, if they're so oppressed here. And, since we're judging everybody by their ancestors, it seems more than appropriate. Plus, they'll gain access to plenty of fertile farmland in South Africa, as Don Lemon often reminds us. The opportunity for untold riches in a land totally devoid of white people is right there for the taking. Will Ayanna Pressley and Summer Lee and all these other Democrats seize that opportunity? Well, of course not. That's because they know that when given the opportunity, they cannot govern. They can't improve anyone's lives. They certainly can't manage a farm. All they're capable of doing is playing the victim act, demonizing white people, looting the treasury. And without white people to demonize, there won't be any money to loot. That's why reparations is a losing issue for Democrats. It's also why South Africa is about to collapse entirely. And it's why, as many more Americans wake up to the reality of what's happening, politicians like Ayanna Pressley and Summer Lee and Ilhan Omar will go the way of Cori Bush. They'll be removed from Congress by the voters. That's the outcome these anti-white politicians are apparently clamoring for. And now that they've introduced this reparations bill once again and made it clear they have no interest in representing all Americans regardless of race, we should give it to them.
Okay. We should go back to Africa for reparations. This is why we talk about our culture here and our history here. All right. This is why that is so important. We built this country. We didn't immigrate to this country like most of these Europeans. Most of the Europeans here in 2025, they came after 1776. They came after America had already been established. The government and the economy had already been established. Most of these people are immigrants. Most of these people can easily trace their family lineage back to Europe. Most of them can. Most of them can. All right. Most of these people came exactly through the Homestead Act, and they came through other immigration policies and other immigration waves like that, like the potato famine and all of that stuff. Most of these people are not, they haven't been here that long, yet they have the right to complain and hoop and holler and have all of this entitlement. And they're never told to go back to Europe, even though they didn't build anything. But like, for instance, if you guys have seen that live stream I did about Lily Coleman, talk about this as a white person's country. They feel, and Lily Coleman, she's not like no original, she's not even like an original white. She's really not. Okay, she's one of these, and this is how white supremacy looks at whiteness. They look at whiteness like a core. To follow me, y'all. I want y'all to follow me. They look at whiteness as like levels to it. Okay, and there's a core to whiteness, a core to whiteness, and everything else is an add-on white. That's like an add-on white. Okay, like a tree. And they look at like the original whites, like what Latin and all of that. They look at the original whites as that, and then everything else is like a branch to their whiteness. Like Irish people, you're white, but that's like a branch to whiteness. Like you're an add-on white. You're not a main character white. You're like a side character white. They look at like Italians. You're a side character white. They look at the Jewish community. You're a side character white. That's how they look at all these other whites. She's not even that, but she said that America is a white person's country, and most of the white people here today weren't here during the creation of America. They came after the creation of America. We were the only people here who were here before, built it, and stayed here the whole time, fought every war. Do you understand that there wouldn't be an America without foundational Black Americans? Not just by building the economy, not just by formulating the government, but do you understand that? Do you understand how embedded we are in this country? How there's been a constitution, and there's been additional amendments in the Constitution, and that's because of us. That's not because of any other group. There's not been a single other group in this country that's put in work necessary to create amendments in the Constitution of this country. From the 1770s till now, you don't have any other group's work that's put in the Constitution besides us. Any other group's culture and history embedded in the Constitution besides us. Do you understand that? Even if you want to talk about the holidays, a lot of people don't bring this up. I want you guys to hear this from me for the first time. Listen to this. The federal holidays, that everybody takes off. Majority of the federal holidays really it's about us. Let's think about it. You got Dr. King Day. That's a federal holiday. That's about us in our culture. You have Memorial Day. That's also about us. You have Juneteenth. That's about us. Labor Day. That is about us. Okay? Really, the 4th of July is also about us too, because if it wasn't for us black soldiers fighting fighting in the Revolutionary War, there would have never been a 4th of July. They would have never been able to defeat the British and the European powers. They would have never been able to do that. There wouldn't be no 4th of July. So the 4th of July is about us. The first person who died in the battle that would lead to the Civil War, the Revolutionary War, was a foundational Black American, Crispus Attucks. Okay, so the 4th of July is about us. So let me count this again in front of everybody so we can keep track. So you have Dr. King Day, you have Memorial Day, you have Juneteenth, you have the 4th of July, you have Labor Day. That's 5 of the federal holidays that we have, and it's all about us. What other group of people have they have holidays, not federal holidays. That's embedded in the government. The government recognizes these holidays. The other holidays you have federally, I believe Columbus Day, even though people really don't celebrate it like that no more, but Columbus Day. Then you have what? Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's. That's 4. And I'm barely counting Columbus Day, but I'm giving them a little leeway. So that's 4 holidays that's about and New Year's Day. Okay. New Year's. Okay. So that's 5 holidays to 5 holidays. All right. And these holidays are not necessarily about their culture in particular, like New Year's and all of that. That's not necessarily about American culture. All of this stuff. That's not about that. So most of the holidays, over half of the holidays, is about us. The holidays in this country is about us. All of this stuff is about, even Columbus Day, which people really arguably don't celebrate anymore. It's barely a holiday. What I say, Columbus Day, what? Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's. That's 4. Did I count 5? Yeah, that's 4. There's only 4 holidays. That's only 4 holidays. Not only the Constitution, and I'm saying this to let you guys understand. It's not just the Constitution. It's the entire history of this country. The history of this country. We are rooted, deeply rooted in the history of this country. More than anybody else, more than even the Europeans, more than the British, more than the French, more than all of them. We have a culture embedded in this country. Not from the actual working, from the fighting, from the music of the country, from the inventions of the country. The fact that you have a light bulb, that's foundational Black Americans. The fact that you have a street light, that's a foundational Black American. The fact that you have an alarm system, a home alarm system, that's a foundational Black American. We are America, really. We are the essence of America. There would be no America without us. Even if you took all of us out of America and put us someplace else, America would really cease to exist. We are the bedrock of America because this is our country, because we built it. We made it. Now, have we been mistreated in this country? Yes, we have been mistreated in the country. Nobody's going to deny that whatsoever. But just because you got mistreated, I want you guys to look at it this way. If somebody comes to your house and mistreats you in your house, does it not make that your house still? Is that still not your house? Do you still not belong in your house? Is that still not your house? Do you still not have ownership in your house? Because somebody comes there and mistreats you. That's what happened here. And that's what finally, what we're starting to recognize. finally what we're starting to wake up and see. Yes, somebody came into our house, our land. We've been mistreated here in our land. That's true, and we're fighting against that. But that does not make it not our house. And we're not going to leave our house and let you take our house because you're mistreating us here. No, the mistreatment is going to stop. That's what's going to happen. That's what's going to happen. We can talk about the refrigerator, the doorknob. Don't even get me started on all the medical advances that we've made, that we still make to this very day. I want to bring up something else. And there's another talking point that this person is going to say. What is this person's name? This person's name, I forget his name. Hold on, give me 1 second. What the hell is his name? Oh, his name is Vince Erlison. So this guy right here, I stumbled across his video about reparations. So we're going to play this. And boy, I said, I got to take the glass off this. Hold on. I want y'all to brace yourselves. I want y'all to brace yourselves. Okay? I want you all to brace yourselves. Right? Because when I said that we were going to do like maybe a massa loving competition, and I said that Brandon Tate, or I keep saying Brandon, I think it is Brandon Tatum, right? Or Fake'em. I remember saying that he would probably take the cake unchallenged. But I don't know, y'all. I don't know. This guy might be a challenge. This guy right here might just be a challenge for Fake'em. He might be. I mean, he's up there. I'm talking about choking on butter biscuits. But but he says something that we got to debunk. He says something that we got to dispel. Misinformation we have to dispel. So brace yourselves.
My advice is to tell Black America to get up, get to work, go out there and earn it. There are spaces out there for you to go out there and earn it. Because right now, I'm going to tell you the truth, man. You can scream, you can yell. One or two things are going to start happening here. Either you're going to be completely ignored or there's going to be a backlash. I've told you before, white folks got a lot more patience than I got. Because when you start talking about reparations, I would really remind you very quickly that we offered freed slaves the Homestead Act, the out west, and the Southern Homestead Act. I'll remind you that Abraham Lincoln said, "You are free, and if your so-called masters do not believe that you are free, teach them that you are free by using the sword and the bayonet."
Okay. So we got okay. The Homestead Act that was given to Europeans. Are you talking about that Homestead Act? Is he talking about that Homestead Act? Is he talking about that Homestead Act or a different Homestead Act? Or is he talking about the 40 acres and the mule that we didn't really get? Is he talking about that? Is he talking about that? Is he talking about the same Abraham Lincoln who said that if it was up to him, he would not free a single slave? Is he talking about that Abraham Lincoln? Is he talking about the Abraham Lincoln that said that he did not believe in the equality of the races, and he would see to it that the superior position was assigned to the white man? Maybe he's talking about a different Abraham Lincoln. I don't know.
I would gladly remind you that after 600,000 white and black freedmen died freeing black people without their knowledge, their consent, or their participation. The most of you walked back on the plantation and worked for your former masters again and refused the gifts that the federal government were offering you, where a bunch of white Europeans came over across the Atlantic and accepted those gifts and became prosperous in America. That's what I'd remind you of.
Y'all, this is too much. This is too much. Y'all, okay. We walked back on the plantation. Do you understand when it went after slavery? Because slavery was really the end of personalized slavery. Okay, which is why at the Emancipation Proclamation did not, in case y'all didn't know, the Emancipation Proclamation is not what actually ended slavery legally. That was the 13th Amendment. The Emancipation Proclamation was pretty much saying that there was going to be no personal slavery. Like Mr. Johnson, you couldn't have slaves and all that stuff. The state had that. So what they did, and this is how they revamped it and evolved slavery. Right after slavery, what you had, especially because most black people were still in the South, you had black codes, which were laws specifically for black people. And in these black codes and these laws, they were saying that, okay, you have to work. You have to show that you have paperwork, that you are employed. The only people who are going to employ you are your former slave masters. So this leads back to sharecropping. Okay, they even talked about that in the Sinners movie. Okay, you pretty much still had to go back to the plantation. No, you weren't owned by the slave master, but you were still working for his plantation or on his plantation, damn near the same thing. And if you were not working, you were going to be arrested. There was nothing else for you to do. So he's making a scene. He's forming this argument that white people came over here and they died in battle bravely for the freedom of black people. And then all of a sudden, black people are like, well, you know what? The plantation, I didn't ask to leave. Let me go back. That's not how that happened. That's not how that happened whatsoever. He says, well, the Europeans came over here from the Atlantic and they benefited from the gifts that the federal government gave them. Yeah. Yes, they did. Yes, they did. Nobody imprisoned them. Nobody enslaved them. There were no black codes to force them to do certain things. There were no rules and regulations that prevented them from owning property like us. We couldn't own no property. We couldn't buy no land. We couldn't do nothing except really get back to the plantation. And if you didn't, what you could do is you could go to jail, and then a plantation owner could buy you from or lease you from jail because you're a convict. So they're leasing the convict to work on the plantation. Convict leasing. That didn't happen to the European immigrants who came over here because America was just giving them free stuff.
I remind you of the fact that there were 3 times more black men in South Carolina than there were white men, and they allowed themselves to be subjugated by those white men. That there were 2 times more in Mississippi, and they allowed themselves to be subjugated. Yeah, they sold out. They sold their votes. They allowed themselves to be intimidated, and they allowed themselves to be beaten, and they allowed Stockholm syndrome to make them bow to their old masters. Yeah, they did.
Okay. Oh, that's not what happened, man. No. So and there was several slave rebellions. So because we outmassed, that means we're not owed reparations then? Is that what that means? There were more black people than white people. Oh, and that point is what? What is the point of that? Now he's talking about how benevolent the federal government was, but he's omitting the fact that the federal government put out the Fugitive Slave Act. And with the Fugitive Slave Act, that means if you as a black person, if you were to go to a free state, the slave owner could come and grab you from a free state and bring you back to the plantation. That was by the federal government. The federal government signed that and was enforcing that. While you want to talk about how benevolent and holy the federal government was. And this argument they often use about the federal government being like the emancipators of slavery because they like to blame slavery on the individual states.
Remind you that after the Civil War, after we spent billions of dollars on the Civil War and 600,000 lives, we passed 3 amendments. The 13th Amendment making slavery illegal, the 14th Amendment giving you equal protection under the law, and the 15th Amendment giving black men the right to vote. And then we sent hundreds of thousands of Union soldiers down here for 12 years to protect you.
Notice how he forms his sentence like he's a white man. he keeps forming his sentence like he's a white man. He keeps saying, we did this to protect you. To protect you. He's talking to us as if he's not one of us. We always got to watch out for the master loving Negroes who's out here forming their sentence. Yeah, we, and when he's referring to himself damn near as a European, we did this and we did that for you all, to save you all from slavery. That's the is we sick massa? Is we okay massa?
From 1865 to 1877 to protect you, because you would not protect yourself as all free men should do. I would also remind you that the southern states, that slavery was not a federal function. Slavery was a state function.
Then what was the Fugitive Slave Act about then? And this is the argument that they make, and they've been making this for years. Well, slavery is about the states. Slavery is not about the federal government. Slavery is about the states. So the federal government shouldn't have to pay anything. No, the states can't do something that the federal government prohibits. If the states were doing it, that's because the federal government allowed them to do it. They allowed them to do it. And when the slaves wanted to free themselves, the federal government jumped in and prevented that on several occasions. He's trying to make it seem like the states are some like a different country or a different government than the federal government.
And that the southern states ran by Democrats were the ones that enslaved you.
Okay, and here goes where we were really enslaved by the Democrats. No, we were enslaved by the government of the United States of America. We're not even going to play the whole, it was really the Democrat game. This is really why I wanted to bring this video up in the first place. It's not it was the Democrats no. Because technically, if we're going to be very honest with you, the Democrats used to be the conservative party and the Republicans used to be more on the liberal side. But the thing is, the Democrats and the Republicans, they were both on the same thing. Okay. Abraham Lincoln, the Republican, while he's talking about the Democrats, and you can, okay, because several slave owning presidents, Thomas Jefferson and all of them, yeah, they were slave owners. They were slave owners and they were Democrat. Abraham Lincoln, he liked slavery. He had no problem with slavery. Said it multiple times. Didn't have an issue with slavery. As a Republican, he didn't have an issue with slavery whatsoever. He didn't want to free the slaves at all. He made that abundantly clear. He didn't want to do it. But his hands were forced to do that. We're not going to play this. It's really the Republican game. That's them trying to divide white supremacy up so we can have this target on white supremacy, on a small fraction of white supremacy. It's two birds of the same coin, because the Republicans weren't doing anything to stop that. All of them were getting money. All of them were complicit. It's the Democrats. Well, the Democrats work for the government, so it's the government. We should go for the top dog, not a party. Though it wasn't, this party is about slavery and then this party is not about slavery. No, both of them were. Both of them were. I'm gonna continue a little bit. I know it's a lot, y'all. It's a lot. I know it is.
And that if you had a beef against somebody, sue the states that enslaved you. Instead, your ignorant behind want to sue the federal government that freed you. Now, what kind of gratitude is that?
He said, what type of gratitude is that? Okay. And this goes to the implication that we didn't actually free ourselves, which we did. We actually freed ourselves. Because even according to Abraham Lincoln, somebody he just brought up in this glorious and prophetic way, he brought Abraham Lincoln up. Abraham Lincoln admitted himself that they would have lost the Civil War if it wasn't for the black soldiers in the Union. They would have lost that. So if anything, they should be grateful for us. They should be grateful for the fact that black soldiers joined the Union and defeated the Confederacy. You said, what type of gratitude is that? Asking as if they came from another world and freed us from the slavery that they had no participation in. These people were in lockstep in slavery, and lockstep in the whole thing for hundreds of years. And then when they were forced to abolish slavery, now they want us to be grateful for that. Even though after that, then they went on to sanction Jim Crow and things and convict leasing and all of this, and then give the slave owners back their land. They were so anti-slavery, they decided to give the slave owners and the plantation owners back their plantations because they were just so anti-slavery, right? They gave them reparations for it.
It reminded me of The Incredibles when it first came on. Mr. Incredible was doing a whole lot of crime, stopping a whole lot of crime. This guy tried to commit suicide. Mr. Incredible saved him. And in the process of saving the guy from killing himself, the guy hurt his neck. He took Mr. Incredible to court and sued him.
In a stunning turn of events, a superhero is being...
Nah, I'm going to fast forward that. And I don't want a copyright strike. Yep. Fast forward that.
This time.
5 days.
Man, that's some gratitude for you. Save a dude's life and he sue you. That's what black folks doing. The federal government comes down here with the Stars and Stripes, Gettysburg, Antietam, Shiloh, the Wilderness Campaign, Appomattox, Petersburg, Richmond, all these battles. Free you. While you picking cotton and putting up ramparts for the Democrats that had you enslaved, and then you got the nerve, and then offer you free land, 150, you talking about 40 acres in a mule, they offer you 150 acres in a mule. Offered you free land, had troops down here protecting you. And what did you do in the election of 1876? You voted to put the same Democrats who had you enslaved back in office, and that's when they pulled the troops out. I'd remind you of that if I was white Americans.
Sometimes you got to process. It take a little time. 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 Hold on. It take a little time. All right. The federal government. He's speaking on the federal government like they're angels who came down here to free us from the Southern Democrats, which were conservative, the Southern Democrats. And they were all like, listen, y'all, slavery is so wrong. It's so bad. And we want you guys to be free. Here's all of this land and all of this resources and 40 acres and a mule. Here, take it, please. We just want you to be happy. And then we was all like, no, we want to go back to the plantation now. We're going to go back. We ain't having to be free now. Okay, and then we go back to the plantation. Is that what happened? That's what he's saying happened. He's not going to say that the 40 acres and a mule that we earned, because we did win the Civil War. By all accord, we won the Civil War. It was because of us. They were losing the Civil War, actually, prior to us joining, black soldiers joining the Civil War. They were going to lose. They were going to lose the Civil War. The Confederacy was stronger than them without the black soldiers, and they were going to lose. But we jumped in and we beat them and we won. So we earned the 40 acres and the mule, and then that was taken back from us. And without land, after leaving slavery, you can't leave slavery. You've been slaved for hundreds of years. You have no property, you have no wealth, you have no way to get any type of income without going back and continuing to work for your income by the plantation owners. So these were the form of slave owners, and then they were the plantation owners. Dr. Claude Anderson said this. After leaving slavery, the 40 acres in a mule, that was there to set up an economy, because you can't just throw people out without any type of resources. So the 40 acres in a mule, that was there supposed to be the necessary tool for the black community to be by themselves and to develop their own economy and to develop really their own part of America. That was taken away. And because that was taken away, what happened was there was no other option for you to have any type of resource besides going back to this plantation. So black people would work there in the plantation, on the plantation. Okay. It was a lot of sharecropping. Then black people would go to certain towns that were not really inhabited like that. Then black people would use the little bit of money they had when it comes to sharecropping. Black people would save up. Black people would go to different towns, and black people actually started developing their own cities, their own towns, and their own neighborhoods. Then what happened? Black people did all of this work, developed ourselves. We developed ourselves. We had our own part of the country. We left everybody else alone. The second white people saw it, they was all like, oh, no, we're not going to have that. We're not going to have y'all doing well now. We can't have that. So either you give it to us or we're going to burn the whole thing down. That's what they decided to do. So a lot of these cities, these Black Wall Streets, and we know about Tulsa, Oklahoma, but that was only one of many Black Wall Streets. So these Black Wall Streets that black people had to save up and work their ass off to develop, they were either ran out of the town or they said, you know what, if we can't take what belongs to you, like they did with Bruce's Beach and all of this other stuff, if we can't take it, nobody's going to have it. We're going to burn it down or we're going to flood it. That's where Lake Lanier is. Do you guys know that Lake Lanier to this day is actually the flooded remains of a black neighborhood, a black town? A black town was flooded, completely flooded, thriving, successful. And they said, if we can't have it, nobody can. Flood it all. They set up the flood to completely destroy the city. They looked at Tulsa, Oklahoma. They said, you know what? If we can't have it, nobody can. And they've done that to a lot of different places. Rosewood, all these places. Oscarville, all these places. Oscarville, exactly. Well, you want to talk about the benevolence of the federal government who allowed them to do that. They allowed them to do that. They allowed the government to bomb cities. They allowed the government to flood cities. They allowed the white folks to come run us out of town. They allowed that stuff to happen. They allowed that stuff to go on. Well, you want to, the way he's forming the argument as if we're just lazy and we wanted to live on the plantation. No, that's not true.
And then politely tell you to get the hell out of my face. And if you didn't do it, I would not so politely tell you to get the hell out of my face. And tell you that if you need a good job, I'll help you get one. As a Christian, you need a good preacher, I'll help you find one. Need a good doctor, I'll take you to him. But short of that, you try to take anything from me or mine, I got two things to get you off of me, and that's Jesus and my 38. Yeah, black fatigue. Hell, I got it. I'm black and I got black fatigue.
Okay. I'm going to say something. It's going to seem... Let me put this in his proper perspective. Okay. It's not much. We're pretty much done because he made his point. We're pretty much done. Because then he goes on to advertising his book or something like that. Right. Let me just wrap it up.
Now you're big and scratching grown men. Big and scratching, complaining. Bringing in illegals because they won't work. The very type of work I did when I was a young man growing up in the South in Tennessee, in the Mississippi Delta, where every summer me and my brothers and sisters went out into the squash fields, into the okra fields, and we picked the produce to earn money so we get our school clothes and we go to school in the fall. My daddy had money. He did. Dad did very, very well, but Dad wanted to teach us to work. You ain't gonna stay at his house in the summertime under the air conditioning and learn to be lazy.
Okay. All of this, black people don't work, black people don't work. What were white people doing? When slavery was going on and we were out there doing the picking of the cotton and tobacco and building the railroads and building the buildings and building the streets and doing all of this and all of that, what were white people doing? If they are such hard workers, why didn't they do it? The second we stop working, just notice the second we stop working and building a whole country for free, we became lazy after that. We just immediately become lazy after the second we stop being exploited, racially exploited, that's us being lazy. So the racial exploitation of black people equals black people working hard and working good and an honest living. If we are getting paid justly, if things are being correct, then if we're not working, if we're not being exploited, then we're being lazy. If we are working, then it's DEI. If we go to school, it's affirmative action. There's no winning. It's no winning. They will find a way to demonize you no matter what avenue you take. You're not working if you're not being exploited. If you're not being exploited, you only got it because it's DEI. And America just loves it. It's that. That's what it is. That's exactly what that is. He's not all of this. And immigrants doing work. And he talks about the immigrants doing work that we're not doing. That's not true. That's not true whatsoever. They're not doing work that we're not doing. Because if they were, their homelands would look different than this, than what it does look right now. I bought that video up just to talk about the whole argument, because a lot of people, when it comes to reparations, they'll make the argument that they'll make two arguments that he made. The main two arguments that he made that I want to point out is the argument of the Democrats owning slaves and slavery being a product of the Democrat Party, not American government, but the Democrat Party. All right. That's the one argument. That's argument A. Argument B is he makes the argument that he makes the argument B is making the argument that it was the states that had slavery, and it wasn't the federal government. So we can't get into the federal government, or we can't ask the federal government for anything. So argument one, it was the Democrats, it was the government. Because what is a Democrat? A Democrat is a party. The Democrat Party is a party of the American government. The Democrats are not separate from the American government. Whether that's the state government, whether that's the city government, whether that's the federal government, the Democrats is a party extension of the federal government. That's like a bird and a wing to a bird. The wing is not disconnected from the bird. You can't sit up there and say, well, no, it wasn't the bird that did that. It was the wing of the bird that did that. No, that's still the bird. The Democrat Party is a party of the federal government. It's not its own government. It's not its own entity. It's not its own agency. It's an extension of that. So what that means is that everything the Democrat Party does is under the guise of what the federal government allows. So that means that our repayment is owed by the federal government. That's what that means. We're not going to sit up here and divide the government into multiple different agencies as if they're all independent of the overall federal government. It's only one United States government. It's not like there's the United States government and then there's the Democratic Party government and then there's the federal party government. No, it's only one United States government, and it was all allowed under one United States. So we are going to go to the top, which is the federal government, who allowed that, who benefited from that, who sanctioned that. That's what we're going to do. When we talk about the states, states had slavery. Well, slavery was a state thing, not a federal government thing. No, it was a federal government. No, it was a federal government thing. The states were also paying the federal government. Y'all didn't know that? Y'all didn't know that? The slave owners that were paying taxes and all that stuff. Y'all didn't know that the federal government was making money off the states? And the state, let's do a little bit of math. So the state was making money off of slavery, and the federal government was making money off the state. So if we calculate that a little bit, that means that the federal government is making money off slavery. The federal government was making money off of slavery, brothers and sisters. Do you understand? Why did I pull that back up? Do you understand that? Not only that, the federal government sanctioned slavery. They allowed slavery. The federal government wasn't like, we're just so busy and we just didn't know there was this slavery thing going on. The federal government knew that there was a slavery thing going on. They allowed it because they were getting money from it. They were profiting off of it. The people who ran the federal government were slave owners. What do you mean the federal government is not responsible for slavery? You had the first few presidents were slave owners. These presidents were slave owners. From George Washington, who was a part of the federal government, to John Adams, a part of the federal government, to Thomas Jefferson, a part of the federal government, to James Madison, a part of the federal government. All the way, we've had slave owner presidents. What are you talking about? A part of the federal government. We're not going to do this thing where we're trying to divide the federal government from the state government and say, well, no, it's not the federal government. It was really just Louisiana. No, we're not doing that. No. And the federal government put forth legislation to prevent the freeing of slaves, because even though they allowed certain states to kind of have their own rules as far as slavery, and there were free states at a certain point in time, if a black slave went to a free state, the federal government was like, nah, we're not going to be having all this escaping now. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the Fugitive Slave Act in place. So if you do escape to a free slave state, we can have slave catchers come and grab you and take you back to the plantation. That was the federal government. So argument A and argument B fully debunked. It's over with. That's done. That's done. And unfortunately, sometimes I've heard that people get caught up with that. People get caught up with that, and they should never get caught up with that. These are pathetic arguments, y'all. The arguments, hold on, in Barbados in 1512, what does that got to do with Foundation Black Americans? There were pirates in Algeria. What does that have to do with Foundation Black Americans? Well, hold on, in South Africa, what does that have to do with Foundation Black Americans? Notice how much they have to reach. Ain't none of that got to do with Foundation Black Americans. None of that has to do with us. Then you're going to have a whole bunch of master lovers out here. You got a bunch of master lovers out doing the same thing. Talking about, we freed you all. We freed you. And this is the thanks that we get. He's referring to himself like he is a damn Caucasian. We freed you all. And this is the repayment and the thanks that we get from freeing you all. Okay. This is how far they have to reach, how pathetic they have to go, how low they have to steep to try to stop us and block us from reparations. It's not going to work, y'all. It's not going to work. It never does. It never does. But it's not going to work. These pathetic arguments are tired and old, and they just have really no gravity to them. They just have really no weight to them. They really don't. They don't. Finally, we're on here. We're running a little late. I didn't even think we were going to be on this long, considering the fact that we started much later than I wanted us to, but life happens, y'all. Life happens. Shout out to Cyberdyne for the Cash App. I appreciate my brother Cyberdyne. Let me get to this from FBA Justice. This is that guy would tell you if the slave would have behaved, it would have been better for them. He's a paid Sambo. Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Most definitely. This man would have said, well, if he only whipped you, Massa only whipped you because you was trying to run away. Now, if you wasn't trying to run away, he sound. I mean, I'm talking about this man sound like the reincarnation of Uncle Ruckus. He just need a little bit of more work physically, and he'll be that Uncle Ruckus. Wherever you didn't try to run away from the white man, he wouldn't have had to beat you. That's what he sounds like. He said, the Negro is ungrateful. White man came out here to free you, and you asked him to pay you. See, niggas is lazy. That's the problem. The niggas is lazy. That's what it is. And all the niggas want to do is smoke. That's what y'all do now. Now, if I was white, now see, the thing is, the white man, because the white man is so close to God. Thank God. Thank Jesus. Thank white Jesus. If I was white, I wouldn't give you a damn thing. I wouldn't give you nothing. Y'all don't deserve anything. Y'all spend it on Popeye's chicken anyway. Okay. Yeah, that's exactly what he is. That's exactly what he is. I can tell his ancestors were snitching on a plantation. Oh, they was. You can tell when somebody is a descendant of a snitch. It goes in the blood. It wasn't a lot of them. There's only gonna be a few snitches. Snitches are always gonna be in the minority. But that snitch gene is strong. That they got strong genes, and it get passed down. It don't skip a generation. Oh, it don't skip a generation. You can tell. You can tell when somebody got that massa, they plotting on your massa gene. You can tell. That's that massa. They meeting in the barn tomorrow, massa. Yeah, you can tell. Okay. You can tell. I can. But family, I appreciate y'all for being with us this evening. If y'all have not gotten the notifications, y'all want to follow me on my social media pages. The link is in the description. But what's really important is y'all liking and hitting that like button. All right. That's what's really important. Also hitting that thumbs up button and hitting the notification bell. All right. Very, very important that you all do all of that stuff because it really helps the channel. We've been taking off. We've been growing. We've made a lot of progress in a short amount of time. All right. A lot of progress in a very short amount of time. And we're going to continue to do so as we enter into the summer. So I appreciate it. And we got some good stuff coming up too. So I appreciate you all for being with us this evening. Thank you all for your support. Thank you all for your patience. Thank you all for watching. And be one to every single last one of you all. I appreciate you all. Y'all stay safe. Stay blessed, family.